This Mortgage Minute brought to you by MortgageBrokersOttawa.com.
And Frank Napolitano's here. I told you it was Sweater Vest Tuesday. It's a nice call.
Thank you.
Gutsy, but
Thank
good.
You. Thank you.
We often talk on this segment about mortgage rates and things that change here and there. Today we're going to talk about the people who are looking for mortgages. And oftentimes we assume that these are people who are fully employed and can
straightforward.
Get themselves a mortgage without trouble.
Straightforward.
What about if you're in a different employment situation? First of all, let's start with self-employed.
Yeah, tricky.
That changes things, right?
Tricky. Self-employed people typically get to write off many of their expenses, and therefore their net income is not quite as healthy as they would be if they were a salaried employee. So a little tricky to get them approved, and getting tougher and tougher as the environment changes and the Bank of Canada toughens the rules like they did back in July. So again, they've got to produce 2 years tax returns, 2 years notice of assessments, and potentially financial statements to show, especially if they're leaving money inside the company where we can get them approved. But typically, if they're trying to buy a house with less than 20% down default insurance, it becomes tougher and tougher.
Really? So
really
they've
tough.
got to have a bigger down payment.
They've got to have
anybody.
a bigger down payment usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say then I'm a person who is employed, but I just get an hourly wage. I'm not a salaried person.
Right. So hourly is interesting because if you work 40 hours a week, and there's many banks say, well, if they're salaried, it's salaried. If they're hourly, then we want 2 years history on them as well. So if you're hourly and you're working full-time hours, it usually is not a problem because we got the 2 year track record if you've been there 2 years. Minimum a year, but up to 2 years is what they're looking for.
Right.
Where it gets tricky is somebody that works 40 hours 1 week, or somebody that works in the summer construction industry, where in the summer they work and then in the winter
they make a pile of dough,
they're
but
laid
they're not,
off.
yeah.
So therefore the 2 year average comes into play there as well, because they may come and apply for a mortgage in February and they're not working at that time.
So it's not necessarily consistent employment.
No, it's not.
It's the average of
It's
what
the average
you make
of.
during that particular year.
You got it.
Right.
You got it.
And they go back a couple of years.
You got it. That's where the
Which
paperwork becomes important, because there's many customers that come to us and haven't done their tax returns for the last 2 years, and it's very difficult to qualify them then.
Yeah, I suppose, eh?
Right. The T4s just aren't enough sometimes. Some banks will not accept T4s. They actually want the tax return / the notice of assessment.
Right. What about pay stubs and stuff? Does that
Well, pay
help?
stubs are good if you're on salary, but
Yeah.
if you're not on salary
It doesn't make
and
much of a
we
difference.
provide them two of them, one of them with 80 hours and the next one with 48 hours, then all of a sudden
So-
that red flag goes
So
up.
tough if you're self-employed. Probably tougher if you're an hourly
Well,
wage
it's not
person.
tougher. I think it's tougher if you're, believe it or not, I think the hourly wage worker is a little easier because they've got a consistent income, and it's almost like a salary, except for their hours vary.
Right.
It becomes tougher for self-employed because they write off things.
Gotcha.
They've got expenses.
What about part-timers? I mean, there's a lot of
Same thing.
part-timers who
Yeah.
they need a place to live, right?
Yeah, same thing. 2 years history is required, and again, if you're hourly but part-time, and you average 30 hours a week, then we're going to use that income to qualify you.
In some industries, part-timers get more hours than they can handle, really. Okay, so putting that all together, does a mortgage broker like yourself and the people on your team, do they help the process when it comes to people in different circumstances?
Well, I think our job is just to explain to customers exactly what the bank looks at and why they come up with the decisions that they do at times.
Right. It's better to go in armed, though, than unarmed, right? So if you
For
go
sure.
into a bank and you don't have the proper information,
Yeah.
you might get turned away, and that's discouraging.
Yep. Documentation is everything.
Go see someone like you, you're going to tell them what they need and how to go about it.
And in many cases, even self-employed people will come in and say, we're looking to buy next spring. Well, here's what you need to make sure you do within your tax return to ensure that you show as much income as possible without having to pay too much tax either.
That's good
So,
advanced planning like that, too, because then you know what situation you're in, and you'll also know what kind of money you need to come up with for a down payment.
Absolutely.
That sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Good advice. So it's not impossible, people.
It's not impossible.
Not at all. Good stuff, Frank. Thanks a lot.
Hey, pleasure. Pleasure.
Keep wearing that sweater then. Looks good.
Keep dropping the pennies off. That's
I know,
fantastic.
eh? Isn't that great?
That's incredible.
I know. We got tons and tons we're trying to roll up here, and we will accept more up until Thursday.
We live in a great city.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We really do.
Yeah, just put the call out and look what happened in a
Yep.
couple weeks.
Wow.